Tonight, Trump's latest pivot, what his campaign shakeup means again, and the increasingly plausible theory that maybe the end goal is not the White House, but rather his own TV network. Then the apologies that not only don't work, they seem to make things even worse. Whether it's about a fake Olympics robbery or your email private server, we'll analyze when people should just stop apologizing, stop talking, and stop digging. And later, Olympic memories. As the real games come to a close, we'll take one long, last look back. Evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're going to begin with a race for the White House and Donald Trump's latest pivot. But first, a check of the numbers. And whether he pivots or not, Trump, he's got just 77 days left to try to catch up to Hillary Clinton in the polls. And every poll is basically telling us a similar story. Just how much catching up does he need to do? Well, for that, let's bring in our senior political correspondent, Andrew Whitman, who breaks the math down.
And Rich, the numbers suggest that Trump has not yet cut into the lead that Clinton first developed after the Democratic nomination and after Trump's string of major gaffes. The poll average from Real Clear Politics has it a 5.5-point race nationally, but it may be larger than that. An outlier poll, one of them, showing Trump up 1 point, brought down the average from just over a 6-point lead for Clinton. But presidents, of course, are elected through individual state elections, and Clinton leads in states that Trump needs to win, including a massive 9-point lead in Florida in a recent poll, a 4-point edge in Ohio, and a double-digit lead in Pennsylvania. Trump leads by 1 in North Carolina. He's going to need that one, too, if he wants to win the White House. Even worse for Trump, he's running dangerously close in states where we expect Republicans to win. In Georgia, which hasn't gone for a Democrat since 1992, Trump is tied with Clinton. His lead is only 4 points in South Carolina, which has been solidly Republican since 1976. 76 is the last time a Democrat won in Texas, and Trump's lead there is a narrow 6 points. And Trump's only up 3 in Missouri. That's a red state since Bill Clinton's 2 elections. So that's the deficit that Trump faces, which may explain his most recent campaign shakeup and pivot last week. Trump hired pollster Kellyanne Conway, seemingly to try and soften his image to appeal to independent and undecided voters. She's reportedly behind his regret comments last week and has been telling reporters Trump will stop insulting people as he's continued to insult people. Check his Twitter feed for comments on the Morning Joe team this morning for proof on that. Trump also added Steve Bannon, the former executive chairman of the far-right website Breitbart, apparently to extend his appeal among conservatives. And then there's Roger Ailes. Ailes is the former head of Fox News who was pushed out last month over allegations he sexually harassed a number of Fox staffers. Ailes is in an unofficial position in the Trump campaign, likely advising Trump on debate and media strategy. Rich?
Well, thank you very much, Andrew. And let's bring in our panel for analysis. Jeannie Zaino, professor of political science at Iona College and professor of campaign management at NYU. And the smiling man to our left, Dominic Carter, here, political journalist and author. Brad Gersman, political consultant, human powerhouse, and founding partner of Gotham Government Relations, and Andrew Whitman, who you've already met, our senior political correspondent. All right, Jeannie, we've seen the numbers there, and when you look down the states, those swing states, none of them are breaking for Trump at the moment. And states, like Andrew mentioned, I mean, the Texas in the margin of error and some of the other states, he's got ground to make up. But what I'm confused about is, in many ways, after the third reboot of the campaign, he still seems to be doing a primary strategy, not a general election one. And then some other times he seems to be doing more outreach or mea culpas. It's confusing. I'm not clear exactly what he's trying to do to close the gap. Are you?
Yeah, he's got a lot of ground to make up, and that's clear from all those polls Andrew showed. You know, the idea that he's tied in Georgia, that the Democrats would even play in Georgia, is almost unthinkable if you go back a year or two. So he's got a lot of ground to make up, and his strategy is perplexing. He bought this $4 million ad buy over last Friday. They played it in 5 states, including Virginia, where he's doing very, very poorly. And many people who looked at it thought it looked like a primary election ad, not a general election ad. In other words, it was appealing to primary voters, not to the independent moderates that he really needs to bring over. The Republican women, the white women who are college educated and not college educated, that we hear so much about. So it is perplexing. And I think the bigger question is, does his campaign have an actual strategy to reach voters in those swing states? Because when you think about it, this race is going to come down to a few key states: Florida, Ohio, maybe Pennsylvania. If they don't have a real ground strategy in those states, this thing is over before it even begins, regardless of what the polls show, because even if you have the polls on your side, you still have to get voters out to vote, and that's a huge uphill battle if they don't start to get their team organized in the way it should be.
He seems, Brad, to still be trying to convince those Republicans who are either on the sidelines or holding their nose for him, I'm really one of you, I'm with you guys, and everything else. Either they're going to vote for him or not, but at this point, he can't win by just, trying to make atones with old friends here. He's got to get those independents, like Jeannie says. Should you stop messing around here? The clock's his enemy, and start trying to get over to the middle.
It's very strange to everybody because the strategy is so clear. I mean, Jeannie mentioned it. Everybody knows it. This is there's no special math to this thing other than the swing states. And apparently, Trump or the Trump group doesn't want to focus there. But I think it goes back even further. I mean, if you think about it, after the convention, he had a nice bump. He was doing very well. He couldn't have been higher at that point in time. People were willing to start to come over and join his camp. If you saw, there was terrific enthusiasm.
Just shut up.
And then he decided, instead of going against Hillary for issues like the emails and things like that, he decided to go after Gold Star families and things of that nature and start insulting and playing small ball. And when I say small ball, I mean it was really small and stupid ball. But that being said, now everybody's running for cover from him, and he has no strategy, and I'm not sure that there's any commitment to regain any strategy.
I suspect he may be torn. I think he's hearing from he's got Kellyanne Conway on one shoulder and Steve Bannon on the other shoulder, each trying to pull him in a different direction. And I think on some level he's trying to figure out, well, do I appeal to more voters and try to be more likable, or do I stay true to myself? Or today the story about this immigration strategy and whether he's going to pivot on that as well. He's canceled a couple of speeches for later this week where he was supposed to outline his immigration strategy. I honestly think he's not sure if he should try to make himself more likable and play to the middle, or stay the sort of tough guy braggadocio that got him through the primary so well.
Well, let me ask you that, Don, because it's interesting. He stayed on prompter a little bit. And it's funny, from some of the people that like the show of it. I don't know how they're going to vote or not. They're like, I liked him more when he was going off the cuff and just speaking that way. But we've seen all the trouble that's gotten him into. Immigration is going to be the next thing he's going to have to lay out. Now, he made it clear. He's building a wall. Mexico's paying for it. And 11 million people, you're getting deported, period. If he in any way shades that, is that smart politics, or does he sound like all the other phony politicians that people hate, which were part of the reason he's gotten this appeal with all the free media and everything else? If you were consulting him right now, you're saying either you're in it right now, might as well stay there, or, okay, try and scale the thing back and not sound as harsh, because you're not going to win this with no Hispanic vote.
Let's start with the good news quickly. The good news is that the only people paying attention to this race right now happens to be people like this.
See, I don't agree with you, Dom.
Okay, voters don't pay attention. Historically, voters don't pay attention to after Labor Day. So we can analyze.
You're right, but here's one thing. The conventions happen earlier in this political season than they have in the past.
Yes.
And I believe unless you've lived under a tree, because this has been such a reality TV campaign, people have formed their opinions of who he is.
Yeah, folks have
Nobody doesn't know who Donald Trump is at this point.
Right. Well, I'm looking for a silver lining for him, but now here comes the realistic news. When you've asked everyone's commented on strategy. Well, when one day you're strong anti-immigration, the next day you're backing up like today, that's what happens when you advise yourself. You don't know, you have a fool for a client. You don't know because none of the experts are there, the consultants are not there advising you. As it stands right now, he's going to lose badly. I'm still not willing to close the door because I know you're going to talk about it later. The email controversy just won't go away. The public hates both of them, and he's still got a shot.
Let me ask you a follow-up. You saw what Trump had to say to a white audience, about blacks. Is there a way he could have done? Now, I know a lot of people took issue because the way he did his math basically made it sound like every single black person is living in poverty in the hood, right? And their lives are miserable. And a lot of people say if you did the same math, instead of 58%, you'd find almost 50% of whites between 18 25. Okay, I'm not going to bore with the math.
Okay.
Is there a way that he can do his messaging, or is it just so dangerous for him? And only 2%, I think, nationally of blacks agree with him at all. Can he make inroads? Should he try?
He could. But you're not going to make inroads with the African-American community before an all-white audience. Pull out Reverend Floyd Flake, who is of Allen AME Church, who's been known to do cross endorsements. Do Calvin Butts. There are plenty of folks out there. Say, listen, Butts, we want to come to Abyssinian. I want to speak to the church, to the congregation. That's how you do it. His message, to be honest with you, with the black community, he was correct. At this point, what does the black community have to lose? What are you really getting? Like, if you're going to be honest about this, what are blacks really getting from the Democratic Party besides delivering all our votes to Democrats?
You have seen what it's been like under other administrations when they do cut some of the safety nets even more to the bone. I'm not saying African Americans as a population or as a constituency in this country have done terrific, but I'm still waiting what exactly he'd do different.
But that's also operating under the theory that that speech and that reach out was actually aimed at trying to increase his African American vote. I don't think it actually was. I think he was trying to appeal to suburban white voters by saying, look, you know, the black community is in the bag for Democrats to their detriment, and I think he thinks that will have some appeal.
I think you're probably right. Jeannie, do you think he surrounded himself with people that give him his best chance? I mean, the idea, we're not even talking about that Roger Ailes, who just got thrown out of his keister at Fox News for sexually harassing, looks like a whole lot of ladies, and more stories are coming up by the day. He's in his ear. Sean Hannity is making it clear that he's giving his advice. Is there anyone that Trump will listen to? Do you think he's finally better positioned now for the home stretch? Or is this thing so muddled it's a hot mess?
I think it depends, number one, on Donald Trump. You know, Kellyanne Conway, Steve Bannon could be the greatest campaign strategist in the world, and if their candidate is not going to take their advice, it doesn't matter. And the other thing, to Andrew's earlier point, is I am still not firmly convinced, and I know we're going to talk about this later, if his goal now is winning the White House or if he has other things in mind. The people you just mentioned, Ailes, Hannity, you know, he's got Spicer coming in now. These people, Bannon, these are people who are perfectly situated to help him do something else, which may not be win the White House, which may explain in part why he doesn't care what happens to people like Kelly Ayotte or other Republicans. He doesn't care what happens to Paul Ryan because his interest is not in governing, his interest is not in the Republican Party, but something else completely.
And that right there is a perfect tease, because to me this is one of the most fascinating conversations. You say, what is he doing so many times? Well, maybe if the end game is not what many people thought was going to be an uphill climb anyway, to go to Pennsylvania Avenue, but instead to be a media darling and even have his own media property, maybe it makes a little bit more sense. I'm not into the tinfoil conspiracy theories, but this thing I think has got a little bit of credibility to it. We're going to talk about what could be next for Donald Trump, maybe a Trump TV. We'll talk about that possibility straight ahead.